Hi, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at John Wick, and maybe doing a little bit more in-depth coverage than we usually do with some of the previous videos that I've posted in the past. What I'm going to be attempting to do here is really kind of break down the method in a lot more detail by taking it part by part, step by step, and even pausing occasionally to go directly into Procreate for some live drawing to kind of get some ideas as to how the thought process went, how the problem solving went, and how that ended up in the final live drawing that you're seeing right here. So let's start by going into Procreate, and we'll take a small look at how we developed the sketch to get to this final piece. Okay, so I jumped over into Procreate here so I could do a little bit of live drawing and give you some sort of an idea of my thought process as we lay out some of the basic sketches here. I'm going to break this down into a couple different parts, but notice here that we're going to start with part one, focusing on the head. Now this is the kind of end product that we end up with. Let me kind of take it a couple steps back, take a look at our rough sketch and one of the reference photos we used to get there. So here we go right here. All right. And again, you'll notice here on the left-hand side, we have what ended up being the final rough sketch that I used to kind of get into my inks. And we'll take kind of a deeper dive into this in the next video. But again, we're going to focus on the head right now. And so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on this so we can just kind of take a look at the side-by-side comparison. Now, one of the things right off the bat I think that kind of bears mentioning is that Keanu Reeves, at least to me, especially in the John Wick movies, comes off a little bit kind of tall, skinny, lanky, might be another word to use. And I really try to exaggerate that, not only in his head, but also in his body positioning as well. Again, we'll get into the body and the rest of that rough sketch when we get into the next video here, but just to kind of point it out, notice a lot of the sharp lines, kind of exaggerated size of the hands and the length of the arms. That's all going to kind of come into some of our discussions a little bit later on when we talk about caricaturing the body. But as far as the head's concerned, let's take, again, a little bit of a focus on that. So if we look at the side-by-side here, you notice that it was almost a very direct reference with a couple minor changes that I made just for composition's sake, mostly related to the gun. The gun and the hands are meant to kind of be coming towards you a little bit, so I've exaggerated them, made them a little bit larger than we see in the photograph, but I also moved that gun a little bit. Here, it was just covering up a little bit too much of Keanu Reeves' face, so I moved it down a little bit just to kind of give me a little bit more to work with and help me capture that resemblance. Now, when it comes to that resemblance, that's really kind of where the next step of this is, or at least in terms of the planning stages, right? So what I'm looking at here is a photograph, but the idea, the problem, the challenge is how to get it from photograph into something that I'm moving into a drawing phase. Where do I start? Where do I begin? Well, if we take a look at the photograph exclusively for just a second, I'm going to kind of lay out some mapping lines a little bit to help guide me as I get into the drawing phase of this. Usually, when I'm starting caricatures, and Keanu Reeves is a pretty good example of this, I like to start with one single line. I draw it right over the eyes, just like this, the eye line, and I use it to basically separate the head in half. What I'm trying to do here is to get some sort of an idea as to where my exaggerations are going to start coming. You don't want to just do them randomly, because if you do, you can lose resemblance very easily, rather. So what I'm going to do here is just draw this line to kind of create some sort of a barrier that says this is where I'm splitting things in half, and I want to see which half is larger. Is the top half larger than the lower half? Or maybe it might be a better way to say which area has more mass. Is there more mass above this line, above the eyes, or is there more mass below this line? And, in the photograph here, it might look a little bit even, but my judgment call was to say that the lower half is larger, more mass, and therefore is going to be more exaggerated. And you can see I kind of did that here. I have this big kind of elongated shape, again, focusing on that thin lankiness of him as well. And the upper head here is a little bit smaller, although we'll kind of get some more volume in there when we add in the hair a little bit later on. But that's my basic shape I'm starting with. And then if we kind of go back to that basic shape mentality, notice that I've kind of created my little egg shape right here, my little oval as well. And I've exaggerated it by just basically elongating it and kind of compressing it from left to right as well. So I'm kind of squinching it in and stretching it out top to bottom a little bit to give me my basic head shape. All right, so that's kind of step number one, just some basic observations, right? Now, the next thing I also want to take a look at is some general shapes in the face that can help me get the resemblance. And one of the things that really stands out on Keanu Reeves is his beard. And his beard really kind of feeds into his cheeks. Now, cheeks are a really, really great way to try to get some resemblance as well, and also to kind of build some form that kind of says that you do have a logical head shape there. All skulls have cheekbones. Some are more exaggerated than others, so if you have opportunity to kind of draw them in, again, it can really help capture that resemblance. So let's take a look at our drawing again. We have some very pronounced cheekbones right here, and notice how it goes into this very unusual pattern from mustache to beard line right here. This little area is very unique to Keanu Reeves, and you'll notice I kind of recreated it right here as well. This little kind of blank area where there's not a lot of hair. No judgment, every beard is different, and every beard might be thought of almost like a fingerprint. And that's what made John Wick such a really interesting character to draw, because we can kind of, have a little bit of fun with that character, knowing that the beard is going to help us capture that resemblance. The shape of the mustache is very much going to help it as well. Now, if you are, familiar with the term negative space, this might make sense. That's really kind of how I sketched in the rest of this lower half of the face. I understood here, based off the photograph, although it's a little bit hidden by the gun, that there was a little bit of a kind of a soul patch down here underneath the lip, and then there was some negative space where the beard just did not exist. And if I sketched in those areas where the beard didn't exist, it made it a little bit easier to find where I should be putting that darker area where the beard does exist. And the same thing again with the mustache, right? So get that in there like that, and once we have that lower part drawn in there, then the rest is really just kind of playing a little bit more connected dots. We already have kind of something of a line there for our eyes. Early on, I kind of drew something of a circle to represent the cranium, and then just drew a draw line around it. And the rest is just kind of mapping in basics like point of the nose and etc. Now, one thing I also want to point out before we get back into the time lapse is the eyes. This little T-zone right here is something that's referred to quite a bit in caricatures. The T-zone representing the bridge of the nose going into the eyebrows. And this shape right here is a great way to also capture resemblance as well. All right, notice that shape it is. And I've got something very similar here going on as well, right? And in capturing that resemblance, we're really kind of focusing on eyes and nose, to a certain degree the mouth as well. That's really where we get it. Now, eyes, right? Take a look at what we've got here. The eye got a heavy brow over top, and then we don't really see all the iris. It's almost like we only see maybe the bottom half of it or so. Same thing over here. So I'm going to translate that over into my drawing on the left. I have something of a slanted eyebrow here, heavy brow, and we're only going to see about half of that colored in portion of the eye. All right. Now, the last thing we really need to talk about when we try to kind of capture that resemblance in the head is the shape of the hair. We don't get the shape of the hair right, then we don't get the shape of the head right. The hair is a big part of who this character is. And if we, again, get that shape wrong, we're going to lose the resemblance. So I'll pick back up on that a little bit when we get back into the time lapse. But for right now, hopefully that's giving you some sort of an idea as to how I got some of the basic concept laid out in my head and how that informed the sketch that we're about to take a look at. All right, so we're back in the time lapse, and you can see how I'm mapping out that shape of the head as we discussed before. Those cheekbones are coming in really well defined, bringing it down into the little chin line right there, and then the rest is just laying in that little T shape, that T zone between the eyes and the nose that we discussed when we did the live drawing just a couple seconds ago. Remember, I'm using the negative space of the beard to help kind of define some of the shapes that I'm putting in the lower half of the face. So once I got the shape of the mustache and the shape of that lower chin piece down there, the rest of it was just a matter of kind of getting in that little gap in between the cheek hair and the mustache, and using that to help kind of inform where some of the other shapes would go, like the laugh lines around the nose, the little soul patch underneath the lower lip, and even the lower lip itself. If you're familiar with the John Wick movies, you may know that John Wick is basically never sleeping. He is constantly on the run, and the photographs that I have for reference really kind of accentuated those bags under his eyes, so I wanted to make sure I included those as well. Now, once I have just kind of a rough idea of the shapes that I want to use, then that's time to move into another layer. So lowering the opacity on the initial sketch, putting another layer over top of it, and then basically just kind of picking and choosing which lines I want to keep, which lines I want to define a little bit better, and which lines I just don't want to carry over into my next version of this sketch. Now, this is where I'm really going to start trying to get an idea of where the resemblance is going to be coming from here. So what you may notice is that as I'm putting in the kind of the next layer of this sketch, I'm really focusing a lot of attention on the cheekbone area, the shape of the mustache, and even the shape of the eyes. The nose shape is also very important as well. These little things, again, just kind of speak to who it is that we're trying to kind of capture a resemblance of. So paying attention to this, going back to your reference drawing and making sure that you're getting these shapes accurate is essential. I'm also using my reference drawing to give me an idea where some of these larger shadows on the face are going to lie, like that shadow to the right hand side of the nose. It's going to be a really important one that I'm going to kind of carry over into the next phase when I get into coloring and lighting and shadows. So I'm going to kind of put some reference to it in my rough sketch so I have it constantly in mind, and it also just kind of informs some basics as to where I'm going to imagine my light source to be a little bit later on. If you don't have an idea where your light source is early on, then you can make some mistakes with some of your initial shading, and so it's really kind of a good idea to kind of figure it out kind of in your head from the very, very beginning, or at least have some basic idea before you start laying any lines down on paper and start making assumptions as to where those shadows might lie. So again, we're going back into the eyes here, kind of focusing on a little T-zone. And when I do this kind of second stage where I'm trying to really kind of define a little bit better the eyes, the nose, and the mouth in these important areas, I work around the drawing a little bit. I don't focus on one area for too long because I find that if I stare at it for too long, I lose it. So I might work on one eye, step away from it, work on the nose for a little bit of a while, come back to the second eye, judge the shapes a little bit. I've also got a habit of drawing eyes a little bit too big as I'm trying to kind of capture that shape properly, so it's not unusual for me to draw in an eye and then go in and just resize it and make it fit proportionally into the head a little bit better. Now I'm looking for mood here, so again this iris area where it's just kind of the lower half of the iris is really, really important because it helps convey that heavy brow and that kind of serious determined mood that we're kind of going for in our picture. If you remember kind of what the final piece looked like, we're going for this kind of serious lighting. There's going to be a lot of rain going on. John Wick's going to be wet obviously because of the rain. So again, the mood here is going to be really important, and the look or the expression on the face is going to kind of have to sell that as well. Heavy brow, having the head almost tilted down a little bit is going to help out with that. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the live drawing when I was showing Procreate Live, that there was going to be some issue with dealing with the shape of the hair. So as we start to get into it a little bit, I'll just kind of warn you right off the bat that at some point I did not get this shape right. And that's really kind of where experimentation comes in. I'm fine with it, but I just want to kind of point out how important it is, because at some point, because of just what I'm drawing here and what I've already got down, it's really easy again to lose the resemblance. I may have something pretty similar to Keanu Reeves' eyes and nose and mouth, but if I don't get that hair shape right, this can become a lot of other people, like for instance Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, or at one point I really thought this whole thing was starting to look like Jesus a little bit, just because I drew the hair a little bit more slender than it would have appeared on Keanu Reeves. So having said that, again, just make sure that you're going back to that reference, that you're taking a look at the shape of not just the face, but also the hair. The hair will really kind of sell the resemblance as well. Now, as we kind of get some of that in, you notice again that the resemblance is tying up a little bit cleaner, I think. And once we kind of get into the final stage of this, then we'll start to be able to kind of take that, separate it into its own layer, and then start taking a look at the body shape. So I'm kind of finishing up just a little bit of the detail right here, and in just a second, I'm just going to kind of show you what the final sketch looks like and get us prepared for what is essentially going to be part 2 of this video series. So again, here's our final sketch, and in part 2, we'll take a look at how we got into the positioning of the body, the gun, and the perspective behind it. So it is going to be a little bit of a lesson on perspective. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed what you saw here. If you liked what you saw, feel free to leave a comment, ask any questions, and of course, please subscribe. That's what this is all about. Take a little bit of time, hit that subscribe button, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks.